Welcome to our new program, American Pulse. We have this American Pulse program because we want to clarify the situation between the Egyptian community and the American society. We want to have a better understanding for better Egypt.
I believe that being an Egyptian American, it's definitely important to know what's going on in Egypt. The past year or so, it has been a revolution. If people don't like what they have, they're going to revolt against their government, and that's what the Egyptian people did. They took down Mubarak. They believed that Morsi did not give them what they wanted. There were a lot of people in poverty, and so now they want to build a new democracy. They want to be the ones in charge of the voting and create a new system. And being an Egyptian, I feel like I have the power, and I believe that I have the vote to change things, not just being here, but going down to Egypt myself and spreading the word and being a part of the Egyptian community. I really want to believe that the American system is helping Egypt, but with the media and everything we see on TV, we feel like it's all fake, you know? When I speak to my family in Egypt, they tell me one thing, and what I see on TV, it's completely different. So I feel like if we really get the eye news and the eye view of what's really going on in Egypt, we'll be able to know the facts and the truth and not just the myth. My hope for the new election and the presidency that's coming up in Egypt is for people to really know what they want. And what they really want is what's going to change Egypt as a whole. And we're all family at the end, and we all want one thing, and that's peace. And we want everyone to have a home, and we want less poverty, and we want everyone to be a family and to come together as one, because in the end we're all Mosreen, we're all Egyptian.
I'm what we used to call an old Egypt hand. I've been going back and forth to Egypt for some time. I am president of MKG Travel, and we're always encouraging travel and tourism to Egypt. We're so happy to have you with us today.
It's a great pleasure to be with you.
I understand that you've just returned from Egypt. Will you tell us about your trip?
I went there under the auspices of my center, the London Center for Policy Research. It was a fact-finding tour. We met with the leading figures in the country. I spent 2 hours with Field Marshal el-Sisi in what was a very interesting and penetrating analysis of American-Egyptian relationships. He's quite a remarkable man, in many ways, quite a remarkable man. And probably the one person in the country who is capable of uniting Egypt at this moment.
Oh, wow.
That's good news.
That's good news.
What did he have to say in the 2 hours about his plans? And so
well, a lot of it, of course, is dealing with abstractions. One of the things that you have to do is to restore security in Egypt before you can once again engage in the tourist business. There were 20 million people, Egyptians, involved in tourism, either directly or indirectly. And now it's in the hundreds. So obviously this has had a profound effect on the Egyptian economy. There are formidable challenges ahead. Mr. el-Sisi understands that. I said to him that the moment he's elected, his popularity starts to decline because he has to deliver. He is a remarkable fellow and understands what has to be done. First is dealing with the problem of the Muslim Brotherhood. They left a very, very negative legacy. That has to be dealt with. And I think the general understands that all too well. And then the second is trying to develop an economy that can find employment for a lot of young people who are unemployed at the moment. The unemployment rate for those under 30 is staggering. And you had 4 million people who worked in Libya. That's no longer possible since Libya is under the control of al-Qaeda. You cannot cross the border. As a consequence, Egypt is facing a very, very real economic crisis. And el-Sisi is the one person who will be given a grace period. He had the opportunity as field marshal to fire on those people who were demonstrating in the streets when 33 million people were out there demonstrating against Morsi. He refused to do so. As a consequence, he became a national hero. So whether you're talking to someone on the left or the right, whether that person is a Copt or a Muslim, they all understand el-Sisi is the one person who can provide leadership at this time. But he has a one-year grace period. At the end of that period, he understands all too well, he has to deliver. He has to start finding infrastructure projects or things that happen in Egypt that lead to some economic vitality.
Do you believe that he and those who will be in his cabinet and in the parliament will have the power to make the changes that are necessary?
He will unquestionably have the power. The parliamentary elections will take place roughly a month after the presidential elections. There are some very talented people in Egypt. Those who have served in the government and understand foreign policy and even some of the domestic policy issues are very talented. I met with Abu Musa, who is, as you know, a well-known international figure. Yes. And we talked a lot about economic development issues, and he talked about the infrastructure problems and interests that have to be developed. And he made it perfectly clear that at the outset, Egypt will rely on foreign direct investment. And that is the UAE and Saudi Arabia playing a very significant role in the Egyptian economy in the short term. But Egypt has got to develop an independent economic base of its own. And el-Sisi, even though not an economist, he has a vision of what has to happen in the country. And I think has a very realistic vision of what has to happen. And he's also quite, I think, realistic about how long a period he has to deliver. So that 1 year period, that time frame that I talked about, is, I think, the period that he has to deliver something to the Egyptian people so they at least see something over the horizon. Because there will be a lot of belt tightening in the short term. It's not easy for any nation to go through that. And particularly difficult when you consider what Egypt has gone through. 2 revolutions in 2 years. It's remarkable, absolutely remarkable. So this society has dealt with convulsions before. The people are resilient and very much behind el-Sisi. Our State Department may not realize just how popular he is, but when this election takes place, and there will be opponents in the election, he will win more than 90% of the vote, I'm predicting.
I understand that the foreign vote here in New York,
95.6 as of last night.
Not surprising. Doesn't surprise me in the slightest. He is a formidable individual. He is intelligent. He has a vision of what he wants to achieve. He's a pious man, but he's not interested in creating a caliphate across North Africa, as did Morsi. So I think that you have someone who is right for Egypt at this time. Even those in the Coptic community that I chatted with, very pro-el-Sisi. Yes. The Pope in the Coptic community is pro-el-Sisi. Those on the left are pro-el-Sisi. Those on the right are pro-el-Sisi. So there's no question at this moment he is extraordinarily popular. Can that popularity last? Anyone's guess, but a lot will depend on what he can do in the economy and whether he can secure the country from the kind of disruptions that the Muslim Brotherhood will try to put in place.
What about the Muslim Brotherhood?
There are, in my estimation, something on the order of about 1 million to maybe 1.5 million Muslim Brotherhood members. They are out to disrupt. They will do everything in their power to try and embarrass this government. There may even be an attempt on the life of el-Sisi. He understands that all too well. You've seen Sadat killed by the Muslim Brotherhood. Nasser was killed by the Muslim Brotherhood. And so this is a real threat. And even if it's not a threat, they will do whatever they can to create domestic panic by simply throwing a crude bomb into a crowded area to kill people randomly. But in the end, the Egyptian people are resilient. They've gone through an awful lot. I think they can cope with this problem. But el-Sisi understands his security forces have got to create some sort of equilibrium, some stability in Egypt before you can start improving the economy. You understand tourism. If you have a State Department advisory that says do not go to Egypt, you're not going to have any tourism. And if the German government does the same, you're not going to have any tourism. And the Swiss government has done the same. When I went to the pyramids one day, I was astonished. There were 2 people standing near the entrance, and I got on the queue. And they looked at me oddly and said, there is no queue. I said, what do you mean there's no queue? Oh, no one's here. So I walked a long distance, and finally I decided I'm going to ride a camel to the pyramids. So I see this fellow who's herding camels, and I said, may I have a camel? He said, how many would you like? I said, I can only ride one. I can only ride one. But it was, but there was no one there. It was remarkable, absolutely remarkable. So, and of course, I've seen pictures of people, thousands of people at the pyramids, and no one was there. And it's tragic because it is such an extraordinary sight. and obviously one of the great wonders of the world, and people from around the globe want to go there. But now, with all of these advisories, most people are discouraged.
The perception is even worse than the reality, unfortunately.
I did not at any point feel insecure. Never. But at the same time, if you're reading a story in the United States or Europe, the likelihood is you're not going to want to go to Egypt.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the case.
So you think it's things are going to get better internally and externally when General Sisi will be in power?
I think that there will be a real desire on the part of the Egyptian people to help al-Sisi succeed.
So he's going to use the will of people to make it happen.
It is the unification of the Egyptian people behind their leader, recognizing the fact that they've been through this convulsion 2 successive years. They want stability. Yes. They want to understand what is the vision for the future. Where is this country going? Egypt is the center of Arab life in the Middle East. Yes. And they're looking for leadership. Al-Sisi can provide it. But as I indicated to you, Al-Sisi has a grace period. But that grace period will only last a year, maybe 2, but certainly no longer. He has got to be able to provide an environment where young people who are graduating from some of the fine colleges in Egypt can actually find employment there. Today, if you're a young person graduating from Cairo University, you try to seek a job in Europe, not in Egypt. And that's tragic. You want to keep the brain power within Egypt. And it's very difficult to do that when jobs are not available.
And from your perspective, what do you think is the course of evolution between the American-Egyptian relationship over the past few years and the current situation, and what do you expect in the future?
Well, it's an interesting question. When Morsi was elected, I think that it was a premature election after the fall of Mubarak. Our government supported the Muslim Brotherhood. They were an elected government. They were elected democratically. When the revolution took place on the streets a year after Morsi was in power, we continued to believe, or our State Department continued to believe, this was a military coup. This was not a military coup. 33 million people on the streets of Egypt represents a revolution, a popular uprising, not a military coup. There was no understanding or appreciation of that in our State Department. The consequence of that is that we still continue to believe that this is an anti-democratic government, that it's a government that should not be in power, that it's not legitimate. After al-Sisi is elected, I hope and pray that things will change. As you know, the Obama administration promised F-16s, Apache helicopters, M1 tanks to fight the war in the Sinai. There's a real war in the Sinai. It is arguably the best well-armed al-Qaeda force in the world. Wow. And there are many casualties that have been taken by the Egyptian army, many, that are not reported. And so in order for Egypt to fight this war effectively, they need the Apaches. Now, Mr. Hagel, our Secretary of Defense, has released the spare parts for the Apaches, which would at least make 8 of the helicopters that the Egyptians possess operational. The problem is it is now held up in committee by Senator Leahy of Vermont. I wrote an open letter to Senator Leahy, which was delivered today, saying you've got to release those spare parts. We are fighting a war against al-Qaeda in the United States. The Egyptians are fighting this war on a battlefront in the Sinai. It seems to me that we have mutual interests, and those interests should be manifest in the way in which these military vehicles, these helicopters, are released to the Egyptian people. So I've sent that letter to the Minister of Defense. I've sent that letter to many prominent Americans, and I hope that it will appear in the pages of the Wall Street Journal as an article. But we're trying to put as much pressure on Leahy as possible. And his argument is, this is not a legitimate government. They were not elected by the people. This was a military coup. They still rely on these words, military coup. And I've said time and time and time again, 33 million people on the streets, 22 million people who signed a petition to have Morsi removed. That's not a coup. That's a popular uprising. Very,
so it would seem, especially when they had no means of impeachment.
Yes.
No means of impeachment. The Constitution had been suspended. And what people do not understand is the extremes that Morsi went to in Islamicizing the country. He reduced the marriage age from 15 to 9. The only medical, quote unquote, medical benefit that would be provided in Egypt, that would be paid for by the government, was female circumcision or clitoridectomies. Now, this is outrageous. People do not know that on June 30th, 2013, there were demonstrators in front of the presidential palace, 12 of them, unarmed, peaceful demonstrators, who were killed in cold blood by the Muslim Brotherhood guards. Story never appeared in the United States. No one knows about this. It was one of the trigger points for people turning out on the streets. So that there were events of that kind that were engaged in by Morsi. People do not know he went to see Kawadawi in Pakistan to get the support of al-Qaeda. People do not know that he traveled to Iran to talk about armaments that would be put into al-Qaeda hands in the Sinai. So Morsi was obviously overreaching. He did not play his hand very effectively, and the Egyptian people were not particularly tolerant of these kinds of measures.
And why do you think we don't hear about these things?
Largely because it is very difficult for the press to absorb 2 revolutions in 2 years. I mean, you may remember the first revolution with Mubarak. There were people on the streets, Tahrir Square. 5 million people showed up. It was on the TV screens in every American home in the United States. Everyone knew about Mubarak's fall, 7 days in a row. And then when Morsi falls, no story. 33 million people on the streets of Egypt. 14 million in Cairo alone. I mean, and no story. It's remarkable. But it demonstrates something about how fickle the press is and how they generally do not have any understanding of foreign policy issues.
Well, unfortunately. Aside from these open letters that you're writing and so forth, tell us some more about some of your activities with...
Well, I had a piece in the U.S. News and World Report last week on Field Marshal El-Sisi and about my views about Egypt. I've written for the American Spectator about Egypt. I have 2 new articles that I've written about Egypt, particularly the role of the military in the society. Again, not well understood. In Egypt, if you were to ask the average person, what is your relationship to the military? Everyone in Egypt either knows someone who has served in the military or has served in the military. That's 99% of the population. If I were to ask an American, how many of you have served in the military and how many of you know people in the military, it's under 0.5%. So we do not fully understand the military in Egyptian terms. The military is Egypt, Egypt is the military. It's not as if these are 2 separate entities. So when you say a military coup, people assume, oh, this is something like the Greek generals took over Greece. It's not like that. Unfortunately, yeah. Because the military is the society. Yes. Everyone in Egypt is attached to the military. And so it's a very different kind of notion. I tried to explain this to Americans, they just didn't get it. Because there's an unfamiliarity with the relationship between the military and the basic soul of the country.
It's true. It's true. What do you think, as someone who's so involved and has spoken to Egyptians in power now and so forth, what do you think we Americans, both as a country and individually, can do for Egypt?
I think that's a very good question. There are several things that the United States can do. One is to understand the conditions in Egypt. We, I think, for a considerable period, relied very heavily on the vote that took place immediately after Mubarak's fall, without any full appreciation of what Morsi was trying to do. He, in some sense, was post-Egyptian. Morsi was thinking about a caliphate across North Africa. He wasn't interested only in Egypt. He had a different game that he was playing. And the Egyptians came to a full appreciation of this. They did not want it. There is a rainbow in Egypt. You have an evangelical population of about 1 million. You have a Coptic population that represents something on the order of 9, 10 million. And then you have, of course, the Muslim population. That is a rainbow. These groups did work together in the past. When Morsi was in power, many of the Coptic churches were destroyed. Some of those churches are older than the Prophet Muhammad. I mean, this is a real tragedy. When I spoke to the Pope, the Coptic Pope, he said to me, there are some very well-meaning Muslims who came to me and said, We want to protect the oldest churches. And we will stand in front of those churches. Should anyone come to destroy them, we will protect the churches. And the Pope said, no, do not do that. Because your lives are more important to me than the bricks and stones that constitute those churches. Now, what has happened is that a real bond has been created between the Copts and the Muslims. I like to see that continue. That is the glue that El-Sisi represents. He is the cement that can bring this together. If I mix metaphors, if there's a rainbow, he wants all of the colors in the rainbow. Not just pull out one color. He wants all of the colors in the rainbow.
Well, he said this in the beginning, didn't he?
Right, he did, and I think he wants to live up to that. I mean, keep in mind, he's a pious Muslim, but he understands that even though he's a pious Muslim, Egypt has a history of tolerance towards others and tolerance towards the large Coptic population in the country. You lose that Coptic population, you lose something very significant in Egypt. He gets it. He understands that. It's one of the things that I admire about him. And when I talked to him about Sharia and the new constitution, he said, look, we're a Muslim country, basically, but it's Muslim, it's Egypt first. It's an Egypt that is Muslim, not a Muslim that is Egypt. And that is an important distinction. And it's a distinction that he makes very effectively. And it's one of the reasons why, at this moment, he is an enormously popular figure. And I wasn't exaggerating when I said he's the one man that can unite the country. And that's one of the reasons why so much hope is placed in him. But the danger, of course, in placing hope in one man is that he has to be able to deliver. The Egyptian people are eager, hungry for someone who can provide that kind of leadership. But it remains to be seen how things will unfold.
So what would you like to advise the Egyptian people for the next few years to do to help?
Well, first, I think the Egyptian people have to be tolerant. You cannot create the pyramids in one day, nor can you create a new Egyptian society in one day. It will take a while. So you have to give El-Sisi the benefit of the doubt. His heart is in the right place. His head is in the right place. He needs time. He will get some support, as I indicated before, from the Saudis and from the UAE. I would like to think that the United States, after the election, will turn its position around and provide some both foreign aid, foreign direct investment, as well as the military aid that the Egyptians require. I hope. So far, I have been unsuccessful in convincing anyone in Washington. I'm only one man, so don't count on that. But I think that maybe after the election, when it's obvious that he will have overwhelming support, maybe things will change in Washington. I certainly hope so. The second thing is that I think it's very important for people to understand the Egyptians are in a battlefront. The war that they are fighting in the Sinai is a war that affects everyone in North Africa. Yes. If the Muslim Brotherhood can be defeated, if Al-Qaeda can be defeated, it sends a signal all through North Africa, through Libya, through Tunisia. There is no question that this becomes a very, very important development. And as I indicated before, Egyptian leadership in the Arab League is critical. The Egyptians are always looked up to as the formidable diplomatic force in the Arab League. And so if the Egyptians can win military victories, create stability, start to deal with the economic problems, this sends a message all across the continent. It's very, very powerful. And I would like our State Department to understand and appreciate that. Because then, when El-Sisi is elected, the United States could play a role in assisting on the economic front.
I think we both agree that Egypt is the cornerstone of the Middle East. So basically,
it is.
Yeah. We thank you very much for your time today. And
my pleasure.
Thank you very much. We've enjoyed having you. We're here today with Consul General Ahmed Farouk of the consulate in New York City, the Egyptian consulate. And I thank you for your time with us today. We're here because, among other things, they're voting today. Egyptian Americans are voting. What does this mean to you?
Actually, as you see the situation outside the consulate, the Egyptian community, the Egyptian expats, they are gathering since 2 days back, the May 15th, and they are coming with turnout is quite large, unprecedented. We've never seen it here before, and they are determined on sending one strong message to the world. They are determined to move forward on the roadmap which has been set on June 30th. To design their future their own way and to have a better future for themselves, for their children and their grandchildren as well. Actually, we opened the ballots on the May 15th from 9 a.m. till 9 a.m. and we received almost 2,000 every day. We are near to reach 6,000 by the end of this day. And this never happened actually in New York.
How many are eligible in the New York area to vote who might be coming here?
Actually, we applied a new system this time for voting. It's any Egyptian holding an Egyptian photo ID such as Raqam Qawmi, we call it in Egypt, or the new passport, which is friendly readable by machines, can come and cast his vote in a free will and without any restrictions. So this new system allowed any Egyptian living in the United States to come to New York or any of our consulate general in the United States and cast his vote. We didn't expect actually this turnout, and the first day the NYPD helped us very very much to organize, to control the crowds outside the consulate. But now it's very well organized, and the system is set, and everything is moving smoothly without any interruption.
And the voting here in New York would be for 2 days this weekend?
Actually, the voting started from May 15th till May 18th.
But here at the consulate?
Yeah, in the consulate. And after that, we received the instructions from Cairo to extend 1 more days according to the large turnout, particularly in the Gulf countries where the Egyptian expats they are there by large numbers.
Sure.
Yeah.
What do you think this means for Egypt in the eyes of the world, the other countries in the world that are looking at Egypt?
Yes, as I said, that it's a strong message that the Egyptian people now are knowing very well how to design the future, their future. They are not waiting from any outsider to dictate on them what they have to do, because they got the lesson. And anyone, and I think all the leaders of Egypt, they have to know that the Egyptian people is determined, and no one can impose on that people anymore or take them for granted, because they know what to do, and they can ousting any regime, any system, if we're not going to fulfill their desires and their dreams.
I must say that there is a different atmosphere. I've been in Egypt before the revolution and since, but before, when there was voting going on, and there was never this level of excitement.
Yeah.
Now seems to be a feeling of hope.
Yes, it's a feeling of hope and a feeling of worrying as well about the future, because the last 3 years the people lived a period of instability, and that left negative effects on their incomes and on the economy in general. So they want the stability. They are aiming for strong political system, democratic system, able to deliver and able to fulfill the desire and to fulfill the dignity and the free will of the Egyptian society.
Mm-hmm. I know that the travel business has suffered greatly.
Yeah.
And I've been very involved in travel to Egypt. People always return, even those in recent times who have been perhaps a little nervous about traveling. They come back, they're always pleased, and they always say the same thing. That Egypt is a very interesting country, but the people are so warming and so welcoming that they want to go back again. So I have to ask you, what can Egypt do to communicate best to the potential traveler that it's safe and secure to visit?
Actually, what should Egypt do? It's what's happening now. That's exactly what the Egyptians are doing now. That's exactly what the Egypt has to do and we're going to do. The economy, the Egyptian economy is suffering. It's suffered for three years now, and despite of that, it proved that it is very resilient and very flexible. And as long as we have the stability that we are all aiming for, I believe that the economy will gonna make a great jump forward, and the growth will, yes, because we have all the elements for going. We have the tourist atmosphere, and we have the nice weather all year round. We have the manpower. We have all the elements of success. We just need the good system and the good guidance and the democratic regime.
Let me ask you something. I'm frequently asked in the travel business by travel professionals why they can't have a documentary of Egypt. They believe that this would help them greatly if there were a documentary that could be shown to potential travelers. Do you feel that Egypt would be open to supporting something like that could then go out to
documentary
about travel in Egypt?
I think we have plenty of documentaries about traveling to Egypt.
We don't seem to be getting them.
Okay, I can connect you with the tourist office here, and they have plenty of documentaries in all parts of Egypt. Yeah.
What do you think, and as a representative of your country, how can America be the best partner for you?
Actually, we are best partners for more than 3 decades, actually. And as I repeat always, that this is the business and the job of my colleague in Washington, and I'm here the Consul General serving the community. But generally speaking, Egypt and the United States enjoyed very high standard of relationship because it was based on and still based on the mutual respect and the strategic partnership. And no one can deny that both parties offered the other huge amount of coordination and cooperation during the last decades. We are willing to continue this relationship. We are willing to continue cooperation and coordination with our American friends as long as it will be based on the mutual respect.
I think that's wonderful. And let me ask you one last question. For our viewers who are in the United States as well as Egypt, what message would you like to impart to them today?
The message that the Egyptian population is changed after the January 25th revolution. Any power or any regime will gonna take this population for granted will lose. Any coming regime should listen to the pulse of the Egyptian people, should dedicate a big portion of his time to fight poverty and to improve the economy as much as he can and as fast as he can.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Any regime will gonna take this population for granted will lose. Any coming regime should listen to the pulse of the Egyptian people, should dedicate a big portion of his time to fight poverty and to improve the economy as much as he can and as fast as he can.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.